It was supposed to be a day of celebration. A day for family to gather around, to laugh, to eat, and to honor the woman who had spent decades of her life raising them, loving them, doing everything in her power to make sure they were safe, happy, and well cared for. My heart was filled with anticipation as I looked at the calendar. It was my birthday. And this year, my family had promised to make it special. I had spent the last few weeks planning everything to perfection. I had always dreamed of a big birthday. Celebration one where everyone would be there, where we would make new memories and reflect on the good times we had shared over the years. My children, especially my son James, had promised to bring the whole family together. Ethan, my oldest grandson, had promised to make an appearance. I felt a wave of excitement as I imagined us sitting around the dinner table, reminiscing about old times and enjoying the warmth of being together. I spent the entire morning preparing. I had carefully selected the food, my favorite dishes, and their favorites too. A roast chicken, mashed potatoes with garlic and cream, sautéed vegetables with butter, and of course, my famous apple pie that no one could ever resist. I even had a chocolate and vanilla layered cake with delicate frosting flowers for dessert. I could practically taste the sweetness of it all. And in my mind, I was already imagining the laughter that would fill the room as we gathered around the table. My home, which had always been a place of comfort and love, was buzzing with activity. I set the dining table with my finest china, carefully arranging each plate and glass. I placed candles in the center of the table to create a warm ambiance and set the scene for a perfect family gathering. The house smelled of freshly baked goods, and the sound of my favorite playlist filled the airlight, upbeat songs that I knew would make the evening even more joyful. Despite the preparation, there was a lingering feeling in the back of my mind, a nagging thought I couldn't shake. Ethan, my oldest grandson, the one I had helped raise when his parents were busy with work. He had always been a bright and energetic child, the apple of my eye, and I had always been there for him. But recently, things had been changing. He had become distant, and his behavior had started to shift in ways that I couldn't quite understand. There were little comments here and there, hints of frustration and anger, but I brushed them aside, telling myself that it was just a phase, that he was growing up and becoming more independent. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something felt off. As much as I wanted to believe that everything was fine, my intuition told me that something was wrong. Still, I tried to push those feelings away, focusing instead on the love and warmth I wanted to share with my family on this special day. By the time everyone began arriving, I was running around making last-minute preparations. My daughter-in-law, Lisa, arrived with her 2 children. The kids rushed over to me, showering me with hugs, and for a moment, I felt a wave of relief. This was what I had always wanted: family. My heart warmed as I saw my family filling the house, all of us coming together for this one special moment. But then, as I heard the familiar sound of Ethan's footsteps in the hallway, something in me froze. I turned to look at him, waiting for the smile I had always loved. But he didn't look at me. He didn't greet me with the usual warmth. His eyes were cold, distant, and as he walked past me without so much as a glance, a wave of unease settled in my chest. "Ethan?" I called after him, my voice soft but trying to mask the concern I felt. He turned, but only briefly. There was no smile, no greeting. He just nodded curtly before heading to the living room to join the others. I stood there, watching him, feeling the air grow heavier around me. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I shook my head and forced a smile, telling myself it was just the stress of the day, that I was imagining things. Dinner was ready, and the table looked beautiful, filled with all the food I had carefully prepared. I called everyone to the table, trying to shake off the nagging feeling that had started to creep into my mind. I wanted this to be perfect, my birthday, surrounded by the family I had worked so hard to build. As everyone took their seats, I noticed Ethan was still standing off to the side, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. He wasn't even looking at me. "Ethan," I said gently, trying to coax him into joining the rest of us. "Come, sit. With us. It's your grandmother's birthday, sweetheart. We're all together." For a moment I thought he might ignore me, but he finally moved, taking a seat at the far end of the table. He still wouldn't look at me, and his posture remained stiff, tense. The air felt thick, and I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of discomfort. I glanced at Lisa and James, trying to read their expressions. They both looked uneasy, but neither of them spoke up. Dinner started, but it wasn't the joyful celebration I had imagined. The conversation felt forced. Everyone seemed to avoid eye contact, and even the children, who were usually so lively and full of energy, were unusually quiet. I tried to engage them, to get them talking about school, about their friends, but it was as if a wall had come up around the table. Then, as I was serving myself a second helping of mashed potatoes, something happened that I couldn't have prepared for. Something that would change everything. Ethan, who had been sitting at the end of the table, suddenly stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor, and the noise drew everyone's attention to him. My heart skipped a beat as I watched him approach me, his face contorted in anger. "You've ruined everything," he spat, his voice harsh. And suddenly, without warning, he slapped me across the face. The sound of it was sharp, piercing, and for a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The room went silent. Time seemed to slow down. My hand went instinctively to my cheek, but the sting of the slap wasn't the worst part. It was the look in his eyes, the anger, the bitterness. He had hit me in front of everyone, and all I could do was stare back, stunned, my heart breaking. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The shock of it all rendered me completely speechless. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask him why he would do this to me, after everything I had done for him, but I couldn't form the words. "Ethan," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. "Why? Why would you do that?" He didn't respond. He didn't even look at me. Instead, he turned and stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there in the center of the table, the tears welling up in my eyes. The family was frozen, unsure of what to do or say. It was as if the entire world had stopped turning. James stood up, rushing over to me, his face filled with anger. "What the hell is wrong with him?" he yelled. "He's out of control." I could barely hear him over the buzzing in my ears, my thoughts swirling in chaos. What had just happened? I didn't even notice when the others stood and began to leave, the evening turning into something unrecognizable. I was left standing there, the cake I had carefully planned for, the dinner I had slaved over, forgotten in the wake of Ethan's violent outburst. I felt hollow, empty inside. The slap was a physical wound, but it was the emotional pain that hurt the most. The betrayal, the anger, the rejection, it was all too much. I had spent years building this family, and in an instant, it had all come crashing down. As the evening came to an end, I knew I couldn't stay in that house, not with the echoes of what had just happened. I excused myself quietly and left the room, my heart heavy with sorrow. After Ethan's slap, the house felt like it had been drained of all warmth. The air was thick with tension, and I stood in the middle of it, still reeling from the shock. The sting on my cheek wasn't the worst part. It was the feeling of abandonment, of betrayal, that overwhelmed me. For years, I had poured my love, my time, and my energy into raising my children and my grandchildren. I had done everything I could to ensure they were happy, healthy, and well taken care of. And yet, in one cruel, sudden moment, my oldest grandson had shown me that none of that mattered to him. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, and I felt as if the walls were closing in on me. I had never imagined that the day I had looked forward to the most, the day I had hoped would be filled with laughter and family joy, would be tainted by such an ugly scene. Ethan, the boy I had held in my arms when he was just a baby, the one I had helped raise when his parents were busy with work, had hit me. He had done it in front of everyone, in front of the people I loved the most. And for what? Because I had dared to love him too much? Because I had tried to show him the same care and protection I had always offered my own children? The room remained frozen in stunned silence. No one knew what to say, what to do. Even James, my son, who had rushed to my side after the slap, was visibly shaken. His face was flushed with anger, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. He hadn't stepped in sooner. He hadn't seen it coming either. And yet, he was still my son, still my flesh and blood, and I could see in his eyes that he wanted to do something, anything to make it right. I didn't want to look at Ethan anymore. I didn't want to look at anyone. Instead, I walked out of the room, my footsteps heavy, and went to the backyard. I needed space to breathe. I needed silence. As I stood in the garden, the cool breeze on my face, I tried to gather my thoughts. The world around me seemed to fade as I searched for clarity. Why had this happened? What had I done to deserve this treatment? Why had Ethan turned against me? I sat on the garden bench, my hands trembling as I clasped them together. The house felt far away, the noise and confusion inside muted. As I sat alone in the peace of the backyard, I closed my eyes, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, disbelief, it was all there, mixing together into a tangled mess that I couldn't untangle. I thought back to the days when Ethan was a child, how he used to run to me for comfort when he scraped his knee or had trouble with school, how he would curl up in my lap and listen as I read him stories, how we would bake cookies together in the kitchen, and I would watch him grow into the bright, talented young man I thought I knew. But now, he was someone else entirely. Someone who was capable of hurting me, not just physically, but emotionally, in a way I never thought he would. What had happened to him? When had I missed the signs of his anger, his resentment? Why hadn't I seen it coming? The longer I sat there, the more I realized that maybe this wasn't just about the slap. Maybe it was about something deeper, something that had been building for years, hidden behind the surface of our relationship. I had been so focused on giving, on loving them all without asking for anything in return, that I had never stopped to think about what Ethan might have been feeling. Had I been overbearing? Had I made him feel like he couldn't live up to my expectations? I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the years of sacrifice, the years of doing everything for them, for my family. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to start thinking about myself. Time to stop giving so much that I had nothing left for me. Time to stop accepting behavior that was toxic, even from my own family. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to sit with the hurt, to acknowledge it instead of pushing it aside. And as I did, something shifted inside me. I realized that this slap, this rejection, wasn't just about Ethan. It was about me, too. It was about my own boundaries, my own worth, and my need to be respected. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know how I could fix things with Ethan or if I even should. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to let this moment define me. I wasn't going to let his actions dictate my future. As I sat there in the quiet of the backyard, a sense of clarity washed over me. I didn't have to take his disrespect. I didn't have to sit in the pain, the anger, and the humiliation. I was still me, strong, capable, and deserving of love and respect. And I wasn't going to allow anyone, not even my own flesh and blood, to take that away from me. It was then that I realized something else. Something that had been so clear, yet so easy to overlook. I had spent my life giving to others, making sure everyone else was happy and cared for, while I had put my own needs on the back burner. I had always been the one who fixed things, who made sure everything was perfect. But maybe it was time for me to fix myself first. I stood up from the bench, wiping away the tears that had unconsciously slipped down my cheeks. I wasn't going to let this moment break me. It was painful, yes, but it was also an opportunity, a chance to reclaim my life, my peace, my joy. As I walked back into the house, I knew that I had some tough decisions ahead of me. Ethan wasn't going to apologize, not yet, at least, but that didn't mean I had to continue to allow him to hurt me. I had given so much of myself over the years, but I had never truly given myself the respect I deserved. And now I was going to change that. The day was far from over, but I could feel a shift within me, a determination that hadn't been there before. Ethan's slap didn't define me. The hurt didn't define me. I was stronger than this, and I would move forward, no matter what it took. In the days that followed my birthday, the house felt like a different place. What had once been a home filled with laughter and warmth now felt empty and cold. The silence was suffocating, and no matter how hard I tried to fill the quiet with the hum of the radio or the bustle of cleaning, the weight of what had happened hung in the air, thick and heavy. I couldn't escape it. Ethan's slap, his cruel words, and the coldness with which he had treated me were like a shadow that loomed over every corner of my life. James, my son, tried to reach out to me. He came by the house, making sure I was okay, offering to talk about what had happened. But no matter how much he tried, I couldn't bring myself to speak to him about it. I didn't want to. The hurt was too fresh, too raw. I couldn't understand how my son had let Ethan behave that way, how he had allowed it to go on for so long without stepping in. Was I not worthy of his defense? Was I no longer someone who deserved to be protected? But despite my anger toward Ethan and my frustration with James, I had no interest in discussing it with anyone. I just wanted to be left alone. I wanted space to process the damage that had been done to me, to try and make sense of everything. How had I raised my children to be so disrespectful? Was this a reflection of my failure as a mother? Did I miss something along the way that had led to this moment of violence and betrayal? I spent hours in the quiet of my house, wandering from room to room, staring at the places where we had once shared so many beautiful memories. The photos on the walls, the toys that Ethan had played with when he was younger, the gifts that had been given to me in better times. All of it seemed to mock me now. Each object carried a memory of a life that no longer felt real, a family that no longer existed in the way I had always imagined it would. One evening, after an especially long day of reflecting, I sat in the living room and stared at the phone. On the coffee table, I hadn't heard from Ethan or James since that night. I had expected a message, an apology, even a simple check-in to see if I was okay. But there had been nothing. The silence from them was deafening, and it stung more than I could put into words. I didn't know if I was ready to speak to them yet, but something deep inside me told me that I couldn't stay in this place of limbo forever. I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep hiding from the hurt and anger. I couldn't let it fester until it consumed me completely. I needed to take control of my own healing process, no matter how painful it was. As I sat there, considering my next move, something unexpected happened. I reached for the lottery ticket that I had forgotten about, the one Janet had given me on my birthday. At the time, I had barely glanced at it, too preoccupied with the chaos of the evening to think about it. But now, in the stillness of the room, I remembered it. I fumbled for the ticket in my bag, pulling it out with trembling hands. I scratched off the silver coating, not expecting much, just a little distraction from the grief that had consumed me over the past few days. At first, nothing. Just a few small amounts here and there. Nothing that would change anything. But then, I scratched off the last section, and my heart stopped. It was a winning ticket. I stared at it in disbelief. My mind raced as I checked the numbers again. Yes, it was true. I had won. The prize wasn't huge, but it was enough to change things. Enough to make a difference. Enough to remind me that life could still surprise me, that there was still some light at the end of this dark tunnel I had found myself in. I sat there for a long time, the weight of the ticket in my hand, the realization slowly sinking in. This was it. This was the moment where everything could change for me. The pain from Ethan's slap still hurt. The betrayal still stung. But this ticket, this win, gave me something I hadn't had in a long time. Hope. It wasn't just the money. No, the money wasn't what mattered most. It was the symbol. It was a reminder that life could still offer unexpected opportunities. Even in the most painful, humbling moments, there was still the possibility of something good happening. Something to remind me that I wasn't alone in this world, that I hadn't lost everything. I stood up from the chair, my legs shaking, but my heart felt lighter. For the first time since that slap, I felt a glimmer of something else. Empowerment. I didn't know exactly how I would use the money, but I knew it was time for me to take control of my life again. I was no longer going to allow Ethan's actions to dictate my worth. I wasn't going to let the pain of this moment define who I was. The next day, I took the winning ticket to the lottery office and cashed it in. The amount wasn't life-changing, but it was enough to give me a sense of security, to give me options. It was the first time in weeks that I felt like I could breathe again. The prize allowed me to plan my next steps, to make decisions that would benefit me. It wasn't just about paying bills or buying material things. It was about freedom. It was about reclaiming a part of my life that had been lost. A part of myself that had been swallowed up in the years of caring for everyone else. I decided that I was going to take a trip, a solo trip, somewhere I could find peace and clarity. I had spent so many years focusing on everyone else's happiness, on keeping everyone comfortable, that I had forgotten what it meant to care for myself. I needed time away from the chaos, time to reflect, to heal. I wanted to go to the coast, to walk along the beach and breathe in the salty air. I wanted to reconnect with myself, to remember the woman I used to be before all the pain, before all the sacrifices. But more than that, I wanted to take control of my own narrative. No longer would I be the person who simply accepted whatever was handed to me. No longer would I let my family walk all over me. I wasn't going to allow Ethan's betrayal or anyone's actions to determine my future. I was going to choose my path from here on out. When I returned home, I found that I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. The trip had allowed me to reflect on everything: my relationships with my children, my role in their lives, and my own need for respect. It was clear that things with Ethan couldn't be fixed overnight. But I had learned something important during my time away. It was okay to put myself first. It was okay to stand up for my worth. I wasn't a doormat. I wasn't someone who existed only to serve others. I had value beyond my role as a mother, a grandmother, and a caregiver. And for the first time in a long time, I was starting to believe it. I wasn't sure what the future held with my family, with Ethan or James. I didn't know how we would rebuild our relationship, or if we even could. But one thing was certain: I was no longer going to wait for them to define my happiness. I had the power to shape my own future, and no one, Not even my grandson could take that away from me. As I looked at the winning ticket one last time, I smiled to myself. I had won far more than just money. I had won my independence, my strength, and my future.